India's consumption story has been wavering for some time now, and the coronavirus outbreak is only expected to make it worse. So what can companies do at a time when everything looks gloomy? Who better than to answer that question than Vinita, the former managing director of Britannia Industries. Thank you so much, Ms. Bali, for joining us. How are you gauging the current consumption landscape? Volumes are missing from most players, barring a few. What's your reading from the latest prints that we've seen?
Niraj, what is quite obvious is that we are witnessing a concurrent slowdown in consumption, investment, partly government spending, as well as exports, which is not a healthy cocktail, which obviously is what is resulting in a GDP growth of about 4.7% in the last quarter. And I think more important than this is the fact that this has been a trend. This has not suddenly hit us. We have been seeing this gradual but significant decline quarter on quarter. And given the fact that we are still very much a consumption-driven economy, or consumption still contributes to about a little over 55 or 60% of our GDP growth, it is not surprising that the numbers are what they are. And I think quite simply, the fact is that consumption is low because people are not spending money. And people are not spending money either because they have little money to spend, and or they are anxious about what is going on around them and therefore careful. And when I talk about anxious, I'm talking about things like prospects for employment, prospects for steady employment. So whatever people can postpone, I believe they are postponing. Whatever they can cut down, I believe they are cutting down. And whatever the essentials are, they are making do with what is absolutely essential. And that is reflected in the numbers. You can see the rupee numbers, but more importantly, the volume numbers. And I also believe that for a country like India, a volume growth of 4 to 5%, which is actually what we have seen in some of the FMCG companies and some of the better ones, is really quite inadequate, because we are looking at a country with very low per capitas of almost every consumption item that you can think of.
Yeah, well, the natural course of business, Bali, could mean volumes should be higher. Would that happen, or would you believe that this lower volumes would be the new normal, and would the coronavirus only add to that?
I think for some time there are other confounding factors as well, which have added to an already declining rate of growth in India. And, it also tells us how globally connected the world is. So the coronavirus and everything associated with it is certainly not helping. It, in fact, is putting a further dampener. The global GDP growth rate, if at all, we are talking about, about 2.4%, which is, significantly lower than what it was projected to be. So the India story is certainly not great from an economic point of view. And the global story is not helping that either. So I think there is greater, not lesser, uncertainty. I think there is, a greater confounding effect when we look at our own consumption. And I think what we will also realize is the significance of China in global supply chains. You look at APIs in the pharmaceutical industry. Well, a lot of those APIs come from China. And, with the factories there not working, etc., we are beginning to see hiccups in the global supply chain. I mean, we saw what happened with Apple when it was announced that, Apple is going to see a little bit of a subdued volume as a result of manufacturing in China.
Is it possible to have a playbook of what happens to consumption in the face of an epidemic, Ms. Bali?
Niraj, I'm not sure if there is a playbook, because this is quite a discontinuous scenario, in the sense that, if you look at the absolute numbers, they are in the absolute not alarmingly large numbers. I think what creates more chaos than bad news is uncertainty. Nobody knows which way this is going. From China, suddenly, we're seeing cases in Italy. There is report in India today, somebody on the Air India flight from Vienna. So I think what this is creating is we don't know what we don't know, and therefore it is very hard to plan for that. Even though everybody's going around saying we don't need to worry, we don't need to worry, but actually I don't think anybody really has the answer. Of course, we have to be careful. Of course, part of the playbook is, I think, perhaps some very extreme measures that are being taken in some parts of the world where, concerts are being cancelled, any large gatherings of people are being cancelled. And the reason for that is that if you actually truncate contact for a period of time, it will help. Now, I think everybody is assessing the situation as they go along, because the world has never seen anything like this before. So in number terms, it's not that alarming, but in terms of we don't know where the next case is going to come from, it is. And, therefore, my own sense is that, perhaps it's better to do what the Japanese are doing, which is to take, concrete, perhaps somewhat extreme measures and reduce the probability of this infection traveling as fast as it otherwise would.
Okay, while it doesn't look all that great, what's your sense on what kind of pricing powers would these companies hold on the back of this? And of course, the fact that commodity prices have cooled off or would be cooling off over the course of the next few days?
I would approach this scenario very differently. Actually, if you see what has happened to results, and I'm making a generalization, most of corporate India, what are we seeing? We're seeing a very tepid growth in top line. Volumes is even more tepid than total revenue. We are seeing a better increase in profit after tax especially, and that is because we got the benefit of lower tax rates. I believe that in India, unless we see a robust increase in volumes, and I'm talking about, definitely I'm talking about FMCG, I'm talking about most goods and services, because as I said earlier, across every dimension, our per capita consumption is significantly lower than even some of the contiguous countries like Sri Lanka, etc. I think this is the time to not beef up margin, but actually to do what business is meant to do, and that is to take your goods and services to more people, more often, in more places than ever before. I also think there's another opportunity for corporate India, and that is to go back and look at the cost effectiveness and efficiency of the supply chain. So I think a focus on cost, a relentless focus on cost, a relentless focus on what I would call selling more to more people more often and in more places. Because, once the economy returns, that will be the new base. I think prioritizing operating margin on volume or revenue, to my mind, at this point in time, is not such a great idea. Now, I know I'm making a huge generalization. It may not work for certain categories of products, but certainly if you're looking at products which are low unit price, high velocity, reaching to millions and millions of people all across India, that would be the mantra.
Okay, Ms. Bali, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us today at BloombergQuint. And viewers, thanks for tuning into this broadcast.